An excerpt from the Redcaps Queen by Danielle Ackley-McPhail. Suzanne jerked awake, sweat-soaked, her body trembling, and her breath fast and shallow in reaction to the raw, brutal memory that haunted her dreams. Screams still echoed in her mind, torturous, agonized, piercing. Lance lay undisturbed beside her, arm draped over her waist, breathing in a slow, relaxed rhythm against the back of her neck. His presence calmed her, again a reminder she'd survived. Most mornings were the same lately. Ever since she'd been captured by the Dub Fae and his Redcap minions, coming within seconds of death, her sleep had been a stalking ground. She growled in frustration as she edged away from Lance's loose grip. A gray hint of light placed the time somewhere just before dawn, way too early to be up. She ignored the piercing phantom pains as she slipped from the bed. The chill of the morning air made her shiver as she ran her fingers over naked flesh that should have borne scars. She caught her unblemished reflection in the bureau mirror across the room and shivered again. Damp tendrils of platinum blonde hair clung to her face, neck, and breasts. In the low light, her blue eyes shone dark and startling against her ashen skin. She scowled at her reflection and quickly shimmied into her clothes, reflexively sliding a well-worn bandana into the front pocket of her jeans, an old habit from childhood. Behind her, Lance stirred. His arms reached for her in his sleep. The hint of a frown furrowed his brow when he did not find her. Awake or not, his protective nature seeped through. As the leader of the Wild Hunt MC, he considered himself responsible for every member, but most particularly for her. Again, frustration burned along her nerves, causing her to tense as she willed him to remain asleep. She loved Lance, had for over 20 years, even before he turned 13 and discovered the joy of girls. But he never seemed to get the fact that she needed to stand on her own, not because she had to, but because it was important to her to be able to. She'd even held a human job once. For nearly a year she manned the drying furnace at the local auto plant, where intense heat baked the fresh paint into a protective shell. A very un-Fae occupation. That had been part of its charm. With the resources of the Fae world to draw on, she hadn't needed to work. What she had needed was to prove she could, that she was strong and capable in all things. Not until she proved that to herself and everyone else could she and Lance move forward and build the kind of life she had always longed for. The life where they were never separate, where family meant love and children. That dream seemed even further out of reach now. If only she could conquer this crippling fear. In the military they called it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. Suzanne, she called it fucked up. Just seeing the color red froze her up worse than a seized engine. If she did not overcome that fear on her own, she expected she never would. But Lance kept interfering. He just never seemed to know when to stand down and when it was okay to step in. When he'd learned about her recent issues, he'd actually gone so far as to try and ban anything red from Delilah's, the bar that served as a clubhouse for the Wild Hunt. Well-intentioned as his effort was, she stopped him straight away. Besides being impractical, a solution like that threatened to cripple her for good. Remnants of an old fear rose up at that thought. She would let no one make her weak again. No one. As she stood there trying to rally for the day, the room around her took on a steadily growing reddish tinge reflected from the rising sun. Suzanne tensed and refused to close her eyes against the sight. She fought to get control of the panic, resisting the urge to crawl back into Lance's arms and pretend herself safe. She wouldn't do it, though. Unlike her father, she made a point of never lying, even to herself. The faster her heart beat, the more her skin crawled, as if distant eyes watched her, waiting eagerly for the chance to bleed her. Surrounded by the dawn's haze, she relived the attack. The flood of red light swept her back to the blasted crossroad, bound and helpless as the dove-faced dragon tears ate through her skin and flesh, and the redcaps feasted on her free-flowing blood. Suzanne shuddered. The panic gained ground till she nearly crumbled to the floor. Sheer will alone kept her standing tall, her slender frame too rigid now to tremble. An improvement after last night, where she'd been curled nearly fetal in Lance's arms, but still unacceptable. She reminded herself that those who had harmed her couldn't get past the shield safeguarding the property, including Delilah's and the living space above the bar. It didn't help. The true demons lived in her head,